announcements. There was a privilege group together. So the community home public fellowship in the annex after the evening service. Sunday, check the email, Facebook, account of details, and service provided. Henry and Carol are celebrating the 50th wedding anniversary, and that takes place Sunday, February 19th at the church, a small fellowship room, 2 to 2:30, and so you know it's necessary for Friday. And the information meeting for the challenge youth conference that takes place on Sunday, February 19th, after the morning class in annex room 113. The one of the conference and the parents need to attend. We will be at 11:15 a.m. for about 15 minutes. If you have questions, you can contact Ron 501 327 25. Not to see comes from the minutes for us tonight. Father, we're thankful that you have your eyes on cares and business for us. Father, we know that we come to you in confidence. Father, thank you for all the blessings you gave us. Thank you so much for the blessings. Thank you for this church, for the blessing. Father, we can celebrate with you tonight. We pray that you bless them and be with them. Pray for healing for those who are ill. Please be with you and everyone who is suffering, struggling with this. We pray for blessing them. Father, we remind them in the water world, earthquake encouragement, we warn you home, we make it home. Father, we pray to you, honor you, Lord, we pray that they can be our family. Father, we pray that you receive none of us. Pray that you learn about and give us all of you and Christ.
I trust you. I'm not feeling good. You ready? Yeah.
So Jonah, as we know, is all about Paul and the city of Nineveh to repentance, but he's also called Jonah. And then Amos, we concluded with Amos last week. Amos judges, or rather God judges the nations, and Amos delivers that prophecy. And then he also speaks on Israel, and still is Hosea. So Hosea is the only one of the northern prophets, writing prophets, and he is the only one of the writing prophets in northern kingdom. His name, interestingly, means salvation, and that is, I think, interesting for many reasons. I don't know if you got King James or what your version is, but I believe King James, that's the book.
Hey, Steve,
Yes.
I hate to interrupt you, but there's a darker colored older model F-150 sitting out here with the headlights on, and I figure somebody probably wants to go home tonight.
That happened to me just the other night.
I don't know if there's anybody in here or not, or if anybody knows who it might be.
that's true. When I married so-and-so, if they proved to be vulnerable to drink, I married a drunkard without knowing it. I think maybe that's sugarcoating it. The harlotries, the adultery of Israel. And over again in the text, if you wish a common theme or word, it would be harlotry or adultery. That's the whole point of the book. So the essential structure here, it's a little bit different than that we encountered in Amos, because Hosea 1 through 3 deals with Hosea and his family, and then chapters 4 through 14 deals with God's denunciations of Israel due to her involvement in the Canaanite fertility cults. And throughout all of this, there is just a wash of very, very powerful emotion. And I hope you've read it recently, because if you have, then you'll, I think, better be able to appreciate some of the things that I'm going to try to share with you tonight. So as with Amos, I have a fair amount of reading that I want to do from this. But as with Amos, I will be skipping around a bit. Just for the sake of orientation, here's the map that I've been using. Hosea doesn't really identify where he is from, as most of the prophets do. So I just have to wave my hand vaguely in that direction and say, he's from the northern kingdom. He's the only one of, according to Dr. Lewis, the only one of the prophets who was from this area. And he's speaking very powerfully, much as Amos had done, about the coming attack that will be leveled against them, that will ultimately, again, remove them from the picture altogether. And if you remember the framework that's in that handout that I've shared with you, perhaps some of you still have that, then the critical years are 722, 721 BC. Amos doesn't clearly identify the enemy. Hosea does. Hosea specifically refers to the Assyrians several times throughout the text. So I'm going to pick up here with verse 2 of chapter 1, and as I said, I'm going to jump around a fair amount. Hopefully this will make sense. Verse 2. When the Lord began to speak by Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, "Go, take yourself a wife of harlotry and children of harlotry, for the land has committed great harlotry by departing from the Lord." So he went and took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. Then the Lord said to him, "Call his name Jezreel, for in a little while I will avenge the bloodshed of Jezreel on the house of Jehu and bring an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel. It shall come to pass in that day that I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel." And she conceived again and bore a daughter. Then God said to him, "Call her name Lo Ruhamah, for I will no longer have mercy on the house of Israel, but I will utterly take them away. Yet I will have mercy on the house of Judah, will save them by the Lord their God, and will not save them by bow, nor by sword or battle, by horses or horsemen." Now when she had weaned Lo Ruhamah, she conceived and bore a son. Then God said, "Call his name Lo Ami, for you are not my people, and I will not be your God. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. And it shall come to pass in the place where it was said to them, 'You are not my people,' there it shall be said to them, 'You are sons of the living God.' Then the children of Judah and the children of Israel shall be gathered together and appoint for themselves one head, and they shall come up out of the land, for great will be the day of Jezreel. Say to your brethren, 'My people,' and to your sisters, 'Mercy is shown.'" Well, I've characterized the minor prophets as minor prophets with major messages. And I think this is, again, a great message, a sad message, a powerful message. But it hardens me as a God-fearer to know that even when God pronounces such severe messages, there's always hope. It's leavened with hope. And as dire as the situation is in Israel, as dire as it was a bit earlier when Amos was prophesying, remember that interspersed amongst these powerful things, the curses that Amos leveled against Amaziah, the priest, who forbade him to prophesy, as dire as all of these things are, again, it's leavened with hope. God is speaking to nations, but he's also speaking to individuals. And there is hope, again, leavened throughout this. So I hope you caught those names because they're very important. Hosea's son is called Jezreel. And that references really the transition that took place when Jehu establishes his dynasty and Ahab and Jezebel are overthrown. Jezreel is where those events took place. If you're interested in that, I'll cite that in just a moment. But that is a place, Jezreel, which means God scatters. But it can also be translated in a hopeful light, God sows. And then Lo Ruhama means no longer have mercy. So that's a terrible thing. But notice in chapter 2, verse 1, say to your brethren, my people, and your sisters, mercy is shown. And then the little boy, the last child, Lo Ami. And his name means you are not my people. But as I've just read in the first part of chapter 2, verse 1, say to your brethren, my people. So that's how this reads in English. But in the ancient language, he's sort of countering all of the negative things that he had said earlier. For great will be the day of Jezreel. Again, it could mean scattering, it could mean sowing, new growth, new life, new possibilities. Say to your brethren, my people, Ami, and to your sisters, Ruhama, mercy is shown. So even though terrible things are leveled against the people, embodied literally in these children, at the same time, God is offering hope to those who look for it and those who are willing to abandon their sinful ways and to follow him. Verses 2 and 3, bring charges against your mother. So here it's my understanding that he's talking to Hosea, the mother being the people, the land, Israel. For she, the mother, is not my wife, nor am I her husband. Let her put away her harlotries from her sight and her adulteries from between her breasts, lest I strip her naked and expose her as in the day she was born, and make her like a wilderness and set her like a dry land and slay her with thirst. So again, a terrible denunciation in a very powerful, very human, very personal way. The word picture is very clear. The mother, again, Hosea is from the northern kingdom. The mother of Hosea, the kingdom of Israel, the northern kingdom, has broken its covenant, not just once, but repeatedly with God, has proven to be an unfaithful spouse. And God is saying, I'm done with you. And we all know that God hates divorce. We all know that God is faithful. God keeps the covenant, even though others break it. But he's to the point where he can no longer deal with the continued infidelities of the northern kingdom. And so he pronounces against her what surely is the worst conceivable statement that a husband who once had a beloved wife could level against a wife who has betrayed him, abandoned him, and taken up with another. He threatens to strip her naked and expose her to the public. And I can't imagine of anything more horrible than that. in a formerly loving relationship. And as we read on down, he continues through the mouth of Hosea to pronounce terrible things. I will have no mercy on her children. I will hedge up your way. I will destroy your vines. I will take away your grain. But then verse 14, he comes almost full circle, and more, actually. Therefore, behold, I will allure her, will bring her into the wilderness, and speak comfort to her. I will give her her vineyards from there, and the valley of Achor as a door of hope. She shall sing there as in the days of her youth, as in the days when she came up from the land of Egypt. And it shall be in that day, says the Lord, that you will call me my husband, and no longer call me my master. There's probably wordplay here. Master is one of the ways to translate Baal, Lord. For I will take from her mouth the names of the Baals, and they shall be remembered by their name no more. Again, I feel hesitant to use words like human in relation to the emotions that God is showing. But if you have had a past, a romantic past that has been complex, a bit convoluted, if your heart has ever been broken, then I think you can understand some of the emotions that already we're getting from Hosea's writings. God is angry. He's bitter. He feels betrayed and rejected. But at the same time, his heart yearns for the love that he had for Israel in the past. And he thinks back to the good old days, to the time when he brought Israel out of Egypt. And Israel was dependent upon him and looked to him. And that's what he wants to reclaim and to recover. Verse 23, they shall answer Jezreel. Again, God sows. Then I will sow her for myself in the earth, and I will have mercy on her who had not obtained mercy. Then I will say to those who were not my people, again, there's wordplay here with lo ruhama and lo ami. Those who were lo ruhama, lo ami, those who were not my people, you are my people, and they shall say, you are my God. So this really establishes this sort of familial picture, which is parallel to what God feels toward the children of Israel, because now we have Hosea and we have all of his family. As I've said, I'm an art historian. I relate, as I'm sure most of us do, to pictures, to images. And I was trying some weeks ago when I was first beginning to work on Hosea, I was trying to think what would be a good way to illustrate this in a very human, powerful way. And naturally, I thought, I wish we had a picture of Hosea. I wish we had a picture of Gomer, and we don't. And then I thought, well, what could I use? And I thought of the Fayum mummy paintings. So these are actually portraits of ancient people. This is 2nd century AD, but it's still ancient. They're painted on wood with encaustic, which is a kind of paint where you use hot wax and mix it with pigment, and you paint on the wooden surface. Because this is in Roman-held Egypt, we have a wide range of peoples. It's obvious from their features as well as other evidences that we have Romanized Greeks, Egyptians, and Romans, but they're in Egypt. In fact, I thought the map was coming up next. It's, of course, a hot, arid place and preserves even sensitive, fragile materials like fabric and wood and paper. Our very word paper comes from ancient papyrus, which is the foundation for our use of pulp materials for writing purposes. So all of these fragile, sensitive materials are preserved in the arid sands of Egypt, including about 900 of these Fayum portraits. For me, as an art historian and as a human being, there's some of the most exciting images that I can think of in ancient art, because when I look into those eyes, they're so well painted, so many of them, I feel like I can relate. I feel like I can get a sense of that person, even though they're long dead and I have never known them. I feel a connection there, and I hope that you will too as we're going through this. On the right side, there's a collection of several. There are about 900, as I've said, altogether of these. They range not only in terms of ethnic types, but also in terms of all ages, all walks of life. This is Egypt. So even though this is Roman Egypt, the people in this period at this time are following the Egyptian practice of embalming their dead, just like the ancient pharaohs' bodies were embalmed. And then incorporating a portrait, a painted portrait, where the head would be in the sarcophagus. So here's the map, and you can see that this is in central Egypt, a little bit south of Cairo. And this is where these artifacts have been discovered. The one that you see there is actually a young Greek man. He must have been in his early to mid-20s when he died. We don't know exactly how old he was. That's his sarcophagus with the portrait in situ, in the original position. So it's intended to give you a sense of the living person, even though they're dead and swathed in about 1.5 miles of linen bandages. Artemidoros is the name that is on this particular one. Many of them, though, we have no idea of who they were, no names. Okay, so I've said all of that to explain this. This is not Hosea. This is one of the Fayum portraits. It's a famous one, but this is not an art history class. So I'm not going to be talking about the works as works of art embedded in history. I'm just using these as a way to illustrate and hopefully humanize Hosea and his family. So I hope that this is worthwhile, because I thought this might be a good way to try to bring this to life. I don't know about you, but when I read these texts, if I'm not really careful, I just think of it as ancient writings. God inspired them. I believe that wholly. But it's hard to think of these people as living their lives through this tiny little niche or window frame through which I can see their lives and their activities, because I'm just given a little bit. And so they're just a lot of names if I'm not careful. And in consequence, the things that they deal with, the life that they lived, most of which we know nothing about other than what the text tells us, it's just lost. So it's my hope that in looking at these paintings, and particularly looking into the eyes of these people, we can imagine what Hosea may have been like. Again, this is not Hosea, but I'm trying to humanize Hosea and the things that he went through, along with Gomer and their family. Any questions or comments? I just today, my daughter's sitting in one of my classes, and I said, "Why don't you ever ask questions?" She said, "Dad, you never give me a chance. You're just talking the whole time." And that's true. I'm a lecturer. I'm constantly under the gun of the clock. So if I don't see hands waving, I'm probably going to just talk. But are there any questions or comments? Will this work? Maybe. We'll try it anyway. Okay, well, let me introduce to you then Gomer. I go through my PowerPoints over and over and over again, but you would never know it, because when I'm up here talking, I blank out what's next. Okay, so another introduction. Hosea is the son of Beeri. He appears to have been, as I've told you, a contemporary of Amos, Micah, Isaiah, the only writing prophet of the north. The northern kingdom is often referred to as Ephraim, so bear that clearly in mind lest we get confused. He's called to preach punishment and repentance to his own people, his own nation. Interestingly, Romans 9:25 is the only other reference to the book in the Bible. I'm not going to refer to that, but I thought that was another little bit of information that might be helpful as regards Hosea. So now let me introduce you to my Gomer. And again, these are real portraits of real people. They are not Gomer and Hosea, but these people had lives as rich, as full, as complex as your life or mine. And I'm hoping that in looking into the eyes of these paintings, we can get a bit of that human connection. So Gomer, interestingly, means complete or perfect. I would like to think that when she was given that name, that her parents were so pleased with her that surely they hoped she would be perfect all of her life. We're told that she was the daughter of Diblaim. We know nothing about this man. As I've said, a known harlot? Well, apparently yes. Apparently she had that proclivity. Here's my idea of Jezreel, the oldest child. And remember, this is referencing the location where Jehu overthrows really Ahab, and Ahab dies as a result of battle, but Jezebel is overthrown and Jehu establishes a new family, a new dynasty. So Jezreel, as I've said, refers to those events, 2 Kings 9:16. And as I've told you, the name can be taken as a negative. God scatters, God disperses, but it also can be taken as God sows, inferring a new beginning, a new foundation. I've already read the two more positive translations in Hosea chapter 1 and 2 that I'm referring you to there. Now, notice in chapter 1, verse 3, which again I've read, the text tells us that Gomer bore him Hosea a son. So this is clearly Hosea's son, Jezreel. And then here's my Lo Ruhamah. I hope as you're looking at these, that not only are you doing what I'm encouraging you to do, trying to relate to these as the principles in this drama. It's very dramatic, this narrative. But I hope you're also wondering, what was that person's life like? Sadly, so many of these paintings are very, very young people. There are some older people, but many of them are quite young. And when you look into those eyes and you think about that little girl, she could be, I think, anywhere from 10 to 12, 13. How sad that a life that young was cut off. Well, the name No Mercy implies that God will not have pity or mercy upon the kingdom of Israel due to her infidelities. Now, here's an important point. The text tells us that Gomer bore him a son. The text says nothing along those lines about Lo Ruhamah. So this may be an assumption, but since that was noted for Jezreel, then I think the implication here is that Lo Ruhamah is not Hosea's daughter. She's the daughter of another man. She's the product of one of Gomer's infidelities. Again, note the hope mentioned in chapter 2, verse 1 and chapter 2, verse 23, where God takes these really horrible names, no mercy, not my people, God scatters, and he flips them, and he makes something positive and hopeful out of them. Now look at that one. I can't look at that one very long. I'll start to well up. You know, I'm a pretty emotional guy. This small child, really a baby, he looks so sad. Again, we don't know anything about this, but children that young should never look that unhappy. Well, he's going to stand in for my Lo Ami. And I think this is very important because this is referencing things, of course, in the Old Testament when God establishes with these very people his covenant with them as a people, and in doing so, building a series of laws. We generally refer to them as the Mosaic laws, but they're God's laws given by God to Moses. And the name here seems to be signaling God's bill of divorcement from the kingdom of Israel for breaking covenant with him. The critical verse that I've noted here is in Leviticus chapter 26, verse 12, but the entire chapter is about really the promises and the curses that will fall upon the people in their infidelities. And one of the amazing things for me is that God knew this point in this story would occur all the way back there, but he went ahead and did it anyway. I think we also know that God hates divorce, and that God tolerated this in Mark. I think it's chapter 10. I'm not exactly sure where, but you know that story where Christ is being tested, and so they're asking about the bill of divorcement that Moses gave, and Christ says that God tolerated this. So Deuteronomy 24:1 deals with the divorce law. And I don't think we're too far off if we understand that in naming Lo-Ami, he is basically signing his bill of divorcement from the children of Israel. So again, here's the wordplay that I've already referenced more than once. So I would like to present to you my idea of what Hosea's family may have looked like. They weren't just ciphers. They weren't just names. They were real, living, breathing, flesh and blood people. And for his own purposes, God is using these people in order to make a very powerful image for Hosea and by extension all of the kingdom of Israel during this time. Well, we know from the text as well as the inferences given as regards the lack of paternity identification with Lo-Ruhamah and Lo-Ami, that Gomer is unfaithful. And so at some point in time, we're not told exactly when or where, but she apparently leaves him. Chapter 3, verses 1 onward. Then the Lord said to me, go again, love a woman who is loved by a lover. I'm told that the word lover can be translated as a friend or a husband. So this is somebody who's already in another relationship and is committing adultery, just like the love of the Lord for the children of Israel who look to other gods and love the raisin cakes of the pagans. So I bought her for myself for 15 shekels of silver and 1½ homers of barley. And I said to her, you shall stay with me many days. You shall not play the harlot, nor shall you have a man. So too will I be toward you. Now, it's my understanding that verse 2 gives us basically the price of a slave at that time. Apparently, this unnamed woman had become so debased with her lifestyle and her multiple lovers that she was being maltreated and was essentially like a slave. And so he buys her with a slave's wage, a slave's price. And she's not named. So the tragedy of this, and I think there are multiple levels and layers of tragedy here. When you take away the mother, what often happens? That's what happens. Family is broken up. The children are traumatized. And everybody loses. There is no winner in this scenario. Well, who is this woman that Hosea is directed to take? Perhaps it's Gomer. We don't know that. Perhaps it's Gomer. Perhaps she was so debased in the life that she led after she left Hosea that her very name is not thought worthy to mention. As I've said, he pays a slave's price for her. I'm a romantic. I'm in my own way, hopeful, optimistic, Try to trust in God. Things will get better, no matter how dark they may seem. And I hope it was Gomer. I really hope that it was Gomer. We don't know. But let's hope it was. And if it was, then maybe the family was reconstituted. Maybe Hosea was blessed with some happiness. I hope he was. Well, we leave this very powerful picture of a broken family, hopefully a reunited one. And we turn now to the latter half of the material. And I'm going to share other images with you that I hope will be of help in this lesson. And I'm also going to glean here and there, as I have been doing, to give us, I hope, a very powerful sense of the range of emotions that are expressed, I believe, very, very powerfully and very intentionally in the remainder of this book. But before I go any further, I've referred to literary theory and criticism. I've acknowledged that I am not a scholar in these areas. Dr. Lewis was apparently a biblical scholar of such a high order. Jeff tells me he had a doctorate in Old Testament, Hebrew, biblical languages, and in Greek as well, 2 doctorates. I can't begin to touch that. In my graduate requirements, I had to learn enough French and German to get by, because those are the major people who committed, nations who committed to art history scholarship. My French is very, very poor. My German is almost non-existent. So I tell people the only thing that I'm worse at than language study is math. And God knows I'm telling the truth. So I'm relying here on what Dr. Lewis says. Dr. Lewis says, speaking of the structure of the book of Hosea is one of the most difficult of the minor prophets. The text, he says, is in poor condition. There seems to be no outline that can be reconstructed. And then he goes on to say that the book may be divided into the 2 sections that I've already given you, chapters 1 through 3, chapters 4 through 14. Well, I was curious about his pronouncement that the text is in poor condition. I even spoke briefly with Jeff the other night about this. I was wondering, is he referring to the ancient texts that have come down to us, that they are themselves in poor condition and difficult to reconstruct? Or is he talking about the structure of the book itself, its inherent layout? Jeff couldn't really tell me, but he thought it might have been the ancient manuscripts. I'm going to assume, for the sake of it, because again, my scholarship is not that deep, I'm going to assume that he's talking about the literary structure. And again, I know nothing about these things other than just what basic commonalities, repeated themes, certain elements that may or may not rhyme, certain ideas that to work together. I know some very basic things, but no more than that. And in reading Hosea, you can certainly get a sense that this is very scattered. But I think there's good reason for that, as we'll see. So we know that a real problem here is spiritual idolatry. And perhaps like me, as you've read through the Old Testament from time to time, you've puzzled over why the children of Israel are so foolish as to bow down to gods made of stone and wood and bronze. It seems so stupid, frankly. And yet they continue to do it over and over and over and over again for hundreds of years. In fact, more than hundreds. Right up to the time of the exile, and then after that, when they come back, they appear to have put away these things. Certainly in New Testament times, we don't have the kinds of scandalous outbreaks of idolatrous practices, at least not on a large universal level, which appears to be going on here, that we had in this time. So, Baal, Asherah. This is Baal. The name means Lord or Master. And he is one of the principal deities of the Canaanite pantheon. He's a sky god. He brings really the rain that makes plants grow. His counterpart, represented here by this work, this is a tiny piece of ivory from Syria up north of Israel. It dates 13th century BC. It shows a woman with no clothing up above. Exposed breasts in the ancient world were commonly used as a sign of fertility. She has a flounced or multi-level skirt on. She's feeding goats with abundant sheaves of grain. And this may or may not represent the Asherah that we read of in the Old Testament. This is an Asherah figure from Lachish in Israel. And it dates around this time, the 8th to the 7th century BC. And notice again the emphasis on the breasts. Asherah is a fertility goddess. She's often worshipped in conjunction with Baal. And here's the connection. Here's what made idolatry so pervasive and so difficult for the people to relinquish. These were the gods and goddesses of the nations amongst whom they had settled. Remember, God told them to drive them all out and to exterminate because they would be a lure and a trap to the people. And they didn't fulfill that commandment. And in consequence, they became a lure and a trap. And even the high, like Solomon, who married many wives, as we know, built temples to please his foreign wives. And we know from time to time the children of Israel intermarry with these women. More than that, the places where they are worshiped are high places, where an image of Baal is set up, an altar of Baal is set up, and nearby them the Asherah poles. You may have encountered that in your reading. So I think we all know the world in which we live is a very mixed up, confused, troubled place. This is some modern Asherah poles. There are neo-pagans in the world. People who believe that it would be great to go back to the pagan gods and goddesses of the past, including Zeus and Isis. Well, Asherah was usually an image of a nude or semi-nude woman on a wooden pole, often in conjunction with images of Baal. And like other fertility goddesses, Aphrodite, Venus, we all know that in the Greco-Roman world, temple prostitution was a very common thing. Men could go in there and actually believe that they were worshiping Venus or Aphrodite by having sex with a temple prostitute. This is going on here. And so when we read of Israel playing the harlot, we read of spiritual adulteries. This is not a metaphor. At these high places, we have men and women who are engaged in sexual practice in worshiping, quote unquote, these pagan gods and goddesses. Here's an artist of today recreating a scene where a devout Israelite is hacking down an Asherah pole. We know that in the time of Hezekiah, as well as in other kings, that this periodically went on, that a good king would come into power and he would clear really all of these kinds of pagan practices and things away. And so the burning of these poles, the hacking down of these images would occur, and this kind of sexual promiscuity would be done away with, and then another bad king would come up and it would all happen all over again. So, is this not another form of the original sin? Believing that you're worshiping the divine in the form of sexual interaction. And incidentally, the Asherah pole is thought to be a phallic symbol, as well as the depiction of the woman. This is why this was a recurrent problem for the people of Israel. It wasn't just that idolatrous practice. it was also because of the sexual allurement that was part of it. It was the full package. And again, this, I think, gives added point when we realize that this is not a metaphor. The harlotries of Israel are literal, they are real, as well as being the spiritual infidelities of bowing down to these images and believing that in some way you're pleasing the divine. Well, idols. When we think of idols, a very unpleasant word, we might think of a golden calf. I actually used this image when I was sharing with you a little bit about Amos the last couple of weeks. Or you might think of something even more exotic, like Shiva or Buddha. What about the image of the Virgin Mary, an Eastern Orthodox icon? So when we see idols in this form, yeah, we don't do that. We're not guilty of that. What about that one? What about that one? What about a beautiful home? What about the ideal wife or the ideal husband? Are these idols? I think they are. Anything that results in our taking God off of the altar of our heart, putting something else up there, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't have to be an image made out of wood or bronze or stone. Anything can be an idol. What about that? What about sports? What about this? Am I stepping on any toes? Maybe not. We're all older, more mature people. Maybe if this was a group of teenagers and 20-somethings, there would be some tension rise. Maybe some of those people would say, well, wait a minute. This is a device. I just use this device to keep in touch with my loved ones, my friends, and my family. Interesting. That's really interesting. You know, in the Eastern Orthodox faith, they make almost the identical claim. When you go into a Greek or Russian Orthodox church and you see the iconostasis, a great screen in front of the altar covered with images of Mary and the patriarchs and Christ and so forth, and you see candles in front of those and people bowing down and praying in front of them, you and I think, idolatry, let's get out of here. They say, no, not a bit of it. I'm not worshiping the image. I'm showing reverence to the thing represented by the image. People, that is not very far from that. And I think we need to think about this and the role that technology plays in our life. And now I'm going to get really uncomfortable, really vulnerable with you. Self. Pride, in some respects, was the original sin. Adam and Eve were tempted to be like God. They put themselves before God and disobeyed his word. This one really hurts. I love art. I spend a whole lot of time looking at art, thinking about art, talking about art, teaching art, studying art. I don't want that to be my God. This one hurts too. My wife will tell you this is quite often how she sees me. I don't want work to be my God. I understand the necessity of it. I understand the value and importance of it. It's not my God, and I want to strive to live it, to show it, not just say it. What are your gods? Let's hope that there is only one God in the heart of all of us. Well, I've got to wrap it up really quick here, so let me do that by pointing out just some of the things that convey, I think, something of the confusion that the text can offer us. Hear the word of the Lord, you children of Israel, for the Lord brings a charge against the inhabitants of the land. There is no truth or mercy or knowledge of God in the land. By swearing and lying, killing and stealing and committing adultery, they break all restraint. with bloodshed upon bloodshed. Therefore the land will mourn, and everyone who dwells there will waste away. With the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, even the fish of the sea will be taken away. So after that poignant family story that illustrates what God is going through, he levels a charge, an indictment against them. He says, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I also will reject you from being priest for me. Because you have forgotten the law of your God, I also will forget your children." And then further on down, verse 10 of chapter 4, "They shall eat but not have enough. They shall commit harlotry but not increase, because they have ceased obeying the Lord." And then he goes on from there, verses 11 through 13, into this discourse against harlotry and wine and the idolatry that is part of all of this. It's very powerful and very bitter. So I think we know when we read, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge," I hear God crying poignantly out. Wailing, I don't think is too strong a word. He doesn't mean that kind of knowledge. He means his word. And through that, a knowledge of him and a desire to do his will. The people have lost their way. They've strayed into these harlotries, into these profane activities that are virtually recreating the original sin. And he has been abandoned. He's faithful, but they have broken covenant with him. Can God's heart suffer such a trauma as breaking? I think it can. And please understand, I'm not talking about anything organic, anything biological. God is immortal. God is eternal. God never changes. But God has emotions. He feels them. We're made in his image. We feel them also. If you've ever felt betrayed, if you've ever loved one and had that person reject you, that is unthinkable. And when you're in that moment, you feel a wash of powerful emotions. You are angry, you are bitter, you are resentful, you grieve. You think of the past, you long for that to come back again. You long to make it right with the other person who's estranged now from you and broken with you. I think this is exactly what all of Hosea is doing. They set up kings, but not by me. They made princes, but I did not acknowledge them. From their silver and gold they made idols for themselves, that they might be cut off. Your calf is rejected, O Samaria. My anger is aroused against them. How long until they attain to innocence? They sow the wind and they reap the whirlwind. And then we come, after all of that, to this bitter and yet poignant memory. Chapter 11, verse 1, "When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. I taught Ephraim to walk, taking them by their arms, but they did not know that I healed them." Verse 8, "How can I give you up, Ephraim? How can I hand you over, Israel? My heart churns within me. My sympathy is stirred. I will not execute the fierceness of my anger. I will not again destroy Ephraim, for I am God and not man, the Holy One in your midst, and I will not come with terror." I'm just reading a few verses, but do you get what I'm talking about? It's an incredible range of emotions, from anger and bitterness, rejection, terrible wrath, to grief, powerful grief, to nostalgic memory, to a desperate desire to love the beloved again. Chapter 14, I'm almost done. I know we're over time. "O Israel, return to the Lord your God, for you have stumbled because of your iniquity. Take words with you and return to the Lord." Verse 4, "I will heal their backsliding. I will love them freely, for my anger is turned away from him. I will be like the dew to Israel. He shall grow like the lily and lengthen his roots like Lebanon. His branches shall spread. His beauty shall be like an olive tree, his fragrance like Lebanon. Those who dwell under his shadow shall return. They shall be revived like grain and grow like a vine. Their scent shall be like the wine of Lebanon. Ephraim shall say, 'What have I to do any more with idols?' I have heard and observed him. I am like a green cypress tree. Your fruit is found in me. Who is wise? Let him understand these things. Who is prudent? Let him know them. For the ways of the Lord are right. The righteous walk in them, but transgressors stumble in them. Well, the kingdom is on the very threshold of being taken into exile, never to return again. I don't think he's speaking to the nation when he says these things about his anger being turned away. I think he desires those few people who will be the remnant to be true, to be faithful, and to stay with him. Well, we're out of time, so let me just flash these up on the screen. Sin destroys lives. The infidelity of Gomer highlights this. How can we avoid spiritual adultery today? What are our temptations, our idols? How does the world make inroads into our lives and our values in the face of what God would have us do? And how do we keep the focus on him? Let's have a word of prayer, please. Father, thank you for your prophet Hosea. Thank you for the powerful message that he delivered. Thank you for the things that he struggled with in order to deliver that message. I pray that as we go forward in the rest of this week, that we will carry these things in our hearts and minds, that we will strive to be faithful, that we will take any idol from our heart that we have set there and throw it away and place you and you only there. In token of that, help us to be the people that you called us to be, the salt and the light, the leaven of the world. Help us to reach out to one another and be the healing touch, the calming spirit. Offer the helpful prayer that will give purpose and focus in troubled lives. Thank you for the many blessings of life. I pray all of this in Christ's name. Amen.